Okay, in this video, we're going to be discussing melody versus harmony. We're going to be using a 9-measure phrase to discuss it from 3 different perspectives. One, I'd like to do this through the lens of a composer or somebody who's writing it down. And then we're also going to do it through the lens of a pianist or general musician on interpreting the score. And then third, I'd like to do this through the perspective of a listener. What is grabbing your attention and why? We're also going to be using images of the score itself for visual representation on what you're hearing and why you're hearing it that way, or how to write it, or how to interpret it. I'm going to go ahead and play the 9-measure phrase that I'm discussing. Okay, let's have a look at this. Remember, we are discussing harmony versus melody. Let's talk about what those concepts are. So harmony is going to be the landscape or the scene with which we're working in. In previous videos, I've referred to harmonic progressions or chord progressions. All that is a chord is a combination of notes that harmonize together. And the progression is the movement of several of those chords back to back. The melody is what is going to be in the foreground. It's the main message, it's the main theme that you're hearing, or the tune that gets stuck in your head. Okay, let's have a look at the score. So first off, there's a few things to describe what we're looking at, because I'm going to assume some people that are watching this video don't actually read music. So first off, you'll notice that we have these dots and lines, and they're kind of separated. You have some that are on top and some that are on the bottom. For those of you who don't play piano, all this means is the top is for your right hand to perform, the bottom is for your left hand to perform. Now, some of you might also be wondering why there are numbers there. In music, we use numbers to describe which fingers you're going to be using to perform any given excerpt. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 are your finger numbers on either hand. So that will tell the player the easiest way to perform what's written is using these sets of finger numbers. Okay. So typically, in piano music, you can assume that the highest note, the highest up on the page, that highest note is going to be your melody. But if you're wanting to write something where that's not the case, you need to make it very obvious. So in looking at this, we have this right-hand line where everything is the same. But if I look at the left-hand line, or the combination of notes on the bottom, you'll notice that they're separated. I have some where the line that's coming off the note goes down, that's called a stem, and some where the line is going up. And they're also different types of notes where they appear different. That is where I am separating what is the melody versus what is the harmony. So as a composer, if I really want to communicate this note needs to be the melody, I need to make it obvious for a performer what the melody is. Now, if I am a pianist that's learning how to play a piece of music, or a musician in general, if it looks different like that thing at the top of the left-hand line, then that should stick out to me that that's more important than everything else. So from a performance perspective, if we're talking about melody versus harmony, the melody is always the most important note, meaning that you need to strike that note harder than everything else. If you don't, the listener will have no way of actually knowing what is the melody versus what is not the melody. I'm actually going to play that excerpt again, where I'm going to eliminate the melody. I'm going to play all the notes, but I'm not going to play it with the melody. And then afterwards, I'm going to perform it with the melody again so that we can compare the two. Okay, so the piano itself is a pretty instrument. So it's not like the notes that I played together didn't sound like they didn't go together, but we didn't have a melody. So I'm going to play that again where that left-hand note, if we remember what the score looked like, that left-hand note, that top note needs to be sounding out above everything else. So I'm going to play that phrase again. Okay, so there's a definite difference when you add that melody in. So let's recap from the 3 different perspectives we talked about. So for composers, or people writing it down, you need to ask yourself, how am I going to communicate what is the melody versus what is the harmony? So how am I going to communicate what note is more important than everything else? What is the phrase or the foreground versus what is in the background? For a musician, you should really be considering, where is my phrase? So I'm reading this. First, I'm reading all the notes, I'm reading the rhythm, but then what makes this musical? How do I actually communicate what my musical phrase is? Now, for you listeners, I'll just give you a challenge to listen for what is the phrase versus everything else. You may consider listening to some instrumental music just to see what is actually in the foreground versus what is in the background. Now, below the video, you'll see a link to the score, should you want to read through it yourself. I'm also going to include a link to the song so you can hear the whole piece of music. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next time.